What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka New York Prepper. I wanted to do a video on water purification and disinfection. So today I'm going to talk to you guys about how to purify and disinfect water. And this is very useful information, and it's a very good thing to memorize, just in case there's an SHTF situation or a natural disaster, grid down event. If you're backpacking or hiking or hunting or spending any type of time in the woods, you may need to replenish your water supply from a natural source like a stream, and you need to know how to properly purify and disinfect water. So in this video, I'm going to try to cover everything about water purification. I'm going to go over pretty much everything you need to know. Whether you're a hiker, a backpacker, a prepper, a hunter, a survivalist, I'm going to go over pretty much everything you need to know. I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible. And everything that I tell you is going to be based on information that I obtained from the Centers for Disease Control. So all the information is pretty much, accurate. I'm not just making things up. So I'm taking this from good sources. I have good sources for this information here. And on top of that, I've been using these filtration methods and purification methods for many, many years. So I've actually tested it myself, and I know that they work. And I can speak to you from my experience as well. So without further delay, I'm going to get into the video. So basically, why do you need to know how to disinfect and purify water? Well, some scenarios that I'll give you guys is that you may be in the backcountry, you may be hiking, hunting, target shooting, fishing, practicing your bushcraft, and you need to replenish your water from a stream or a river or a lake or pond or something like that. You may also be in an SHTF situation where there's a lack of power, there's no resources, infrastructure is down. There may be a grid down situation where the power grid is no longer functioning. The water supply may be limited, so you have to go out and find water for yourself and your family. In that situation, you're also going to need to know how to purify water and disinfect it. And then some other situations could be a bug out or a get home situation. If you're escaping from your job, if you're in a situation where there's an SHTF situation and it happens in a city and you work in that city and you have to walk home from your job to get home, while you're walking home, it's impossible to carry, all the water that you would ever need on your back. So you're going to need to replenish water, as you're escaping and evading to get home from the situation. So water may look clean on the outside. Water is very, especially if you come across like a cold mountain stream, it's very attractive. You look at the stream and it's nice and crisp and cold, and it's moving freely, and it's in the middle of the wilderness, and you have a temptation to just drink right from the stream, but that's very dangerous because you don't know what's inside that water. Typically it's clean, but you don't know for sure what kind of microorganisms are living inside of that water, so you need to make sure you disinfect it. Same thing with any kind of standing water, lakes, ponds. Even rainwater can have bacteria in it if it's sat around on the ground for a little while. And a lot of these bacteria, viruses, and parasites, they come from human and animal waste, and it's typically carried downstream. Or if it's in a lake, then it just sits in the lake. But just remember that just because water is clear doesn't mean it's safe to drink. And so I'm going to go over the three main types of microorganisms that you need to worry about. It's just three main categories. You have parasites and protozoa, then you have bacteria, and then you have viruses. And Parasites are the largest organism, then comes bacteria, which are a little bit smaller, and then you have viruses, which are extremely small. So just remember those three categories: parasites, bacteria, and viruses. Parasites are the largest, viruses are the smallest, and bacteria is in the middle. So just remember that as we go forward. And because different filtration methods, different purification methods, different disinfecting methods will work differently based on what type of microorganism you're trying to target. So, but just remember that, and we'll talk more about that as we go into the video. So the cleanest looking mountain stream could have pathogens in it that you can't see, and if you drink it, you know, there's a chance that you could get diarrhea or fever, especially if you ingest a parasite of some sort, and that can cause dehydration, loss of electrolytes, and weakness, which can reduce your chances of survival in any type of situation, whether it's an escape and evasion situation, whether it's a bug out, whether it's backcountry hiking, you know, whether it's a grid down situation. You know, you don't want all your family members to start getting sick, because then you're going to have to take care of them, and without proper medical care, it could potentially be life-threatening, especially if there's a severe diarrhea or loss of electrolytes that could affect, you know, your electrolyte balance, which can affect your heart. So you need to know the main methods of water disinfection and purification, and you need to know the pros and cons of each type of method, and also the limitations of each method. So I'm going to break up the methods of disinfection or purification into four special categories, four separate categories. You have boiling, which is represented by a canteen or this canteen cup. So you have boiling water. You can use chemicals. You can use filters, or you can use UV light. So there's four methods: boiling, chemicals, filters, and UV light. So the first thing that you need to know is that boiling is the best method. So boiling is the golden standard. There's no other method there's no other method that can work better than boiling. Boiling is 100% surefire guarantee that you're going to kill everything in the water, whether it's a parasite, a virus, or bacteria. It's going to kill pretty much anything, as long as you bring the water to a rolling boil for at least 1 to 5 minutes, depending on your elevation. So if you're less than 5,000 feet, you're going to want to boil at least a minute. And then if you're above 5,000 feet in elevation, at least 3 minutes. And then if you have a rolling boil for 5 to 10 minutes, you're pretty much going to kill everything in the water. So boiling is the most surefire way to disinfect water. It's the best way to disinfect water. So boiling is the best. Then you have chemicals and filters and UV light. So each of these methods has limitations. So let me just get my notes here for you guys. So I'm going to actually show you my notes so you can actually follow along. So hang on 1 second, I'm going to get my notes out here. Alright guys, so I got my notes out, and before I get my notes out, I'm going to go over some of the gear here. So here I have a Olicamp canteen cup, stamped for 16 ounces, which is really good to have that stamped graduations, so you know how much water treatment, chemicals to add. This way you can have exact measurements. I have a canteen here, which you can also, so you can boil in the cup or the canteen. Here I have some chemicals. I have chlorine dioxide from Potable Aqua. That's the name of the company, chlorine dioxide. I have pills, iodine pills, also by the Potable Aqua company. It's 16% tetraglycine hyperiodide. I have some iodine tincture, which you can get at your local pharmacy, which is also useful for sterilizing wounds and cleaning out wounds. And then here I have some disinfecting bleach. So these 4 chemicals can be used to disinfect water. So you have your chlorine and your iodines. Those are the 2 main chemicals that are used for disinfecting. And then over here I have my Sawyer mini filter, which is really cheap. You can get these mini filters for like 30 bucks. And they come with a straw, a cleaning plunger, so you need to clean this out periodically, which is one of the negative aspects to a water filter, is that they need to be cleaned and they can get clogged up. And then here's just a water bottle that works with the filter, so you can fill this up and use it that way. So that's my Sawyer Mini. This is one of the most common water filters on the market because it's affordable and it works well. This is 0.1 micron filter, absolute hollow membrane. So supposedly this is supposed to work for pretty much everything, even viruses, but I have my doubts about that. And you also have to maintain the filter as well. So let's look at my notes here now, and we're going to go over in detail the pros and cons and kind of analyze the whole variety of methods here that you can use to treat water for disinfecting. So, all right, so here we have the best method is boiling. Like I said, you want to have that rolling boil for at least a minute. If you're below 5,000 feet, hang on guys, just gonna set this up here. And if you're above 5,000 feet, you want to have 3 minutes or more of boiling. But it's always good to just let it boil for like 5 minutes. You know, you're not harming anybody, you know, by letting it boil for another couple minutes, just to be sure. You know, it just has to be up to a rolling boil. Next method, like I said, is chemicals. So with the chemicals, you have 2 types. You have iodine and chlorine, and there's different variants of the iodine. You have iodine tablets, which I have here. The potable aqua tablets. These are really cheap also and very effective. So you have your iodine tablets, your iodine crystals, and then you have your iodine tincture. So the iodine tincture is available at any pharmacy. It's used for disinfecting wounds. It's a topical antiseptic. It kills bacteria on the surface of your skin or in wounds. You know, it reduces bacteria levels. So you have your iodine tablets, crystals, and tincture, and then you have your chlorine dioxide and then bleach. So you have your Clorox bleach, and then you have your chlorine dioxide pills. Okay, and I'll go over the differences between that in a second and the pros and cons. So the first thing you need to know about chemicals is that they're not effective against parasites and protozoa. They're only effective against bacteria and viruses. Filters, on the other hand, filters are not effective against viruses and bacteria, or they are effective. Let me rephrase that. Chemicals are effective against parasites and protozoa, but they're not 100% reliable. You know, they may kill 70% of the parasites, or 60% or 30%. It really depends on a variety of factors, which I'm going to get into in a second. Filters, on the other hand, filters work well against parasites like Cryptosporidium and Giardia lamblia, which are the 2 main waterborne parasites in the U.S., North America. They work well against parasites, but they're not as effective against viruses or bacteria. So that's one major difference that you need to know between chemicals and filters. And UV light, you know, UV is a little more of an exotic method, so I'm not really going to go too detailed with it, but I will say that UV can work on everything. It can work on parasites, bacteria, and viruses. However, you need to have a good, strong UV source. It needs to be you need to either have direct sunlight for a few hours, or you need a special UV pen that you can use to disinfect the water. So it has to be strong light. It can't just be moderate or weak sunlight or weak UV light. So chemicals and filters, I'm going to discuss these now. So, you have your chemicals, which are not effective against parasites. And the reason why they're not effective against parasites, and the most common parasite in the US and Canada is Giardia and Cryptosporidium. These are waterborne parasites that are passed by animal and human waste. So, one thing I will say is that before you even think about water purification and water disinfection, you need to make sure that you pick a good water source first. So what I mean by that is you should always try to find running water. Stagnant water is always going to have more microorganisms in it than cold running water. So you want cold running water that's as far away from any kind of agricultural areas, which may have a lot of livestock that may be, excreting a lot of feces. And in those feces, you're going to have a lot of bacteria, a lot of viruses and parasites and they're going to leach into the river or whatever water source that's passing through that agricultural area. And if you're downstream from it, you're going to be getting all those parasites and protozoas and bacteria and viruses that are going to be passed in the livestock waste. So if you're in a rural area or in a wooded area, you want to pick running water. The more that it runs, the better it is, the more rapidly it's running. You want to stay away from any sources of human, animal, or livestock waste as far away as possible. Even if you find a wilderness stream, you want to try to look up and down along the stream to see if there's any evidence of human beings being there, any evidence of human camps, or any animal trails that are going over the river, if it's like a stream. And you want to stay upstream from that. So if you locate one of those areas, like evidence of a human camping or something like that, you want to go upstream as far as possible. And you want to also scout around that area as well and make sure there's no evidence of human or animals coming through, because they could potentially be passing the microorganisms into the water, and that could get into your body. So, and then if you're in an urban area, you want to think about septic waste and any water areas that are close to septic systems, or any kind of municipal septic systems or septic infrastructure that's used for carrying waste, human waste. And then obviously, before I get more detailed, if you're in a life or death situation where you're extremely dehydrated, you're better off just drinking the water if you have no method of purification. So if, let's say, I don't have a canteen, or I don't have iodine or chlorine with me, or I don't have a filter, or I don't have a way of using UV light, if I'm dehydrated and I feel like I'm gonna die, it's better off that I drink the best water that I can find and then deal with the ramifications of that later on, than it is for me to just become dehydrated, severely dehydrated, and then just die. So if you're severely dehydrated, you're better off drinking water, even if there's a risk of contamination, than it is for you to just die and die of dehydration. It's better to take that chance. And also, it takes time for, especially parasites. Parasites take time for them to actually infect your body and make you feel sick. Sometimes it can take up to a few weeks for the parasite to actually break free from its shell and start to do damage inside of you. So those first few weeks are going to give you a window of time to get to safety and get medical care, and then get on some kind of prophylaxis, antibiotics or antiparasitics. Bacterias and viruses, they're going to act a little bit faster on you. So, within 2 to 3 days, you may start to feel sick, but again, depending on the situation, that 2 to 3 days that you gain by drinking the water is going to outweigh the risk of potentially getting sick, because in that 2 to 3 days you may get rescued if you're in a survival situation, or you may get to a medical care facility of some kind. Or if it's SHTF, you may get home where you have antibiotics or something like that. So if you're in a severely dehydrated state, it's better to take the chance and drink something that's potentially, unpurified and not disinfected than it is to just die of dehydration. So I just wanted to get that out of the way because, if you're severely dehydrated, it's better to just take the chance. So now that we've got that out of the way, we can continue with the disinfection methods. And like I said, if you do have to make that hard choice of drinking unpurified water, like I said, you want to find running water that's far away from any kind of waste, human, animal, or livestock waste, or if it's in an urban area, away from any kind of septic waste. Also, any kind of water that may be in a puddle that's elevated above the ground and there's no evidence of birds or animals drinking it and it's exposed to the sunlight may also be pretty safe. Like if there was a rainstorm and there's some puddles, up on a high ground area above the ground on like a rock or something, and it's exposed to the sunlight, that sunlight's going to keep the water sterile. There's not going to be any, parasites or anything in that water, especially because it's rainwater. So that's another option too. So those things you need to keep in mind, if you do have to make that hard choice. Try to find the cleanest source of water that you can, away from any kind of human or animal waste. Make sure it's running. Avoid stagnant water. If it is stagnant water, try to get water that's up off the ground and exposed to the sunlight. And also you can collect rainwater and dew water as well if you need to do that. So now that we got back out of that out of the way, we'll get back into the disinfection methods. So you have chemicals, which, like I said, iodine and chlorine, not as effective against parasites. So chemicals will kill bacteria and viruses. Some of the bacteria and viruses that you need to be concerned with are Salmonella, E. coli, Shigella, typhoid. There's a bunch of different bacteria, and as far as viruses go, you're going to be worried about hepatitis, norovirus, enterovirus, different types of things, rotavirus, and salmonella can be really dangerous. It can be really bad. So bacteria, it will work against bacteria and viruses. However, there's a certain factor that affects how effective it is. You need to have enough contact time. So the chemical needs to be properly mixed with the water, and it needs to have enough time for it to actually act and do its job and kill all the bugs inside the water. And that contact time is critical. For most chemicals like iodine or chlorine, you're looking at a minimum of 30 minutes of exposure to the chemical before the bacteria starts to die. So you minimum, you want to wait 30 minutes after you treat the water with chlorine or iodine or any chemical. You want to wait at least 30 minutes to start to get the majority of the microorganisms killed. The longer you wait with the chemicals, the more effect it will have, especially when it comes to parasites. And the chemicals are not as effective against parasites, but they will kill them. It just won't be like 100% guarantee surefire method like boiling will. So they have done studies on chlorine and iodine and how effective they are on Cryptosporidium and Giardia. And Cryptosporidium, if you guys don't know what that is, it's a type of parasite that it's passed through animal feces or human feces. It's the way the parasite spreads is there's a little cyst, and the cyst looks like a little round thing, and the cyst has a very hard shell on the outside. And the shell of the cyst, it protects it. It's like an egg, basically, the eggshell. Like, think of an eggshell. The eggshell is hard calcium, and it protects the inside of the egg from the environment. So a cyst, it has that hard shell on the outside, that protects it from chemicals, from temperature extremes, from different climatic extremes. So the cryptosporidium cysts are very persistent in the environment. So an animal could have passed some feces into a water body, and it could have passed those feces, 6 months ago, and the cysts are still alive in that water, even though it was 6 months ago. Or an animal could have passed the feces on the ground, and the cysts could actually be living on the ground, and they could still be alive, and because they have that hard shell. And that's why the chemicals, the iodine and chlorine, are not as effective against them, because they have that hard shell. Versus bacteria and viruses, they don't have a very thick cell wall. So the chlorine and the iodine pretty much disintegrates the cell wall and kills the bacteria or the virus. So you need to have enough contact time so the chemical can actually dissolve the cell wall of the bacteria and the virus. And as time goes on, it's better and better. And that's affected by the pH of the water, the temperature of the water, and the clarity of the water. So you want to get the water as clear as possible before you use a chemical. You want to filter it with like a bandana. I usually carry some type of a bandana with me. I always carry 2 bandanas in my survival kit. I have this bandana right here. It's an old Budweiser bandana. And this is a great way to quickly clean up the water. If you have to get water that's a little bit dirty and it's not like a clear stream, like a clear mountain stream, with this bandana I can put some rocks and some sand in here, and I can pour the water over it into my cup. So I can put my bandana here. I'll just demonstrate real quick how I would do that. I could put my bandana right here in my cup. Okay, and then here I could put some dirt, some clay, soil, or even better is activated carbon. I keep a little bit of activated carbon in my survival kit, and I could put the activated carbon here, and the activated carbon will absorb any kind of debris or dirt or anything like that. And pour the water over the filtration media here, whatever that is, if it's your soil, your dirt, your rocks, and that'll pretty much filter most of the dirt out of the water, and it should come up clean inside of your cup. And then at that point you're ready for treatment. Then you can add your chemicals. So if it is dirty water and you can't filter it that well, you're gonna have to increase the dosage of your chemical. Sometimes you have to double the dosage so it can work properly. Same thing if the water is cold. If the colder the water is, the more chemical you're going to have to add in order for it to be effective. And the pH as well. So if the water is very basic, it has a high base, then it's not going to be as effective. And if it's more acidic, it's more effective. Some of the downfalls with chemicals is that they can expire. So you need to check your chemicals in your survival kit to make sure that they're not expired. Typically like chlorine dioxide or iodine tablets, they usually have an expiration date of like 3 or 4 years from the time you buy it usually. I'm trying to see if I can't find it here on this bottle, but you're looking at least 2 to 3 years, but you want to always check your expiration dates, to make sure that they're not expired. So that's one thing, is they can be expired. And also iodine is affected by light. So that's why like iodine, these iodine tablets here, they're inside of a dark colored bottle, because the light will deactivate the iodine and make it less potent. So that's another thing. So let's finish up with the chemicals. So here, I have examples of the chemicals here, and I'll go into the dosages of each one. So here you have your iodine tablets, which for most people, that's the most common form of iodine. Here you put two tablets per 1 quart of water, and you wait 30 minutes before drinking. And you have to remember to close the cap as soon as possible, and tightly, so this way the tablets don't get compromised. The problem with iodine is that it tastes really bad. It has like a really bitter taste. I don't know if you guys ever used iodine before, but it has a very bitter taste. It's a very nasty taste. It doesn't bother me that much, but I know it bothers a lot of other people. You can easily get around that by adding vitamin C or some type of a flavoring to it. But another thing with iodine that's not so great is that a lot of people are sensitive to it, and it's much more harsher on the body than chlorine is. Like if you're pregnant, or if you have some type of a thyroid condition, or if you have an allergy to iodine, then you're not going to be able to use iodine. So that's going to rule out for those people. And then you also can use tincture iodine, which is you can get at the store. And I recommend that you keep some iodine tincture in your survival kit as a backup water filtration method, because iodine tincture, you can use it on your wounds, but you can also use it to disinfect water. And it's very cheap, and it has alcohol. It's mixed with some alcohol, so it actually won't freeze on you. And you can keep this in your survival kit, and it has multi-uses. You can use this to clean out a wound, and you can also use it for disinfection. Now, in order to disinfect with iodine tincture, you need to put 5 drops. Let me see, where are my notes here? Here we go. I'll just show it to you guys. So for iodine tincture, you need 5 drops per quart if the water is clear, and then you want to double that if the water's dirty, so 10 drops per quart of the tincture. And then you can also, so that covers the iodine. Now let's get into chlorine. Now the thing is, chlorine is actually stronger and more effective against parasites than iodine is. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Chlorine, especially chlorine dioxide. Chlorine dioxide is the pill form of bleach, basically. It will actually kill parasites, but not as effectively as boiling or filtration or UV light, but it will kill parasites. The only thing is you need to have a very long contact time. So typically after like 30 minutes to an hour, most of the microorganisms will be killed by the chlorine dioxide. But if you want to make sure that it kills most of the crypto and most of the giardia, then you need to have like a 4-hour contact time. So these potable aqua chlorine dioxide tablets, if you want to, the manufacturer recommends a 4-hour contact time. After you put the pill in the water, you need to have a 4-hour contact time to make sure that it kills the crypto. And another thing too with chemical disinfection is that you need to make sure you disinfect the not just the water itself, but the container that you're going to be holding it in, and any threads, like on your canteen you have your drinking threads here. So you want to disinfect that, especially if you use your canteen and you dip this into a water source. This is going to be contaminated now. There could be microorganisms. If I dip this in a stream, there could be microorganisms on the threads. So typically the way you do that is you leave the cap a little bit loose while you're waiting for it to finish doing its job, and you shake it a little so the water that has the chemicals in it will hit the threads and it will disinfect it. So just don't forget to do that. You have to disinfect the threads on your canteen, or if you're using a canteen cup around the mouth area, especially if you use this to dip it into a stream or something like that. So the chlorine dioxide will work against parasites. You just need to have a long enough contact time, up to 4 hours. It's still not as good as boiling. There still may be some parasites left over. It's hard to really say. I never had any problems with it, and actually chlorine dioxide is used by municipal water supplies to disinfect the water. So it's pretty time tested. That's that chemical, that chlorine taste from your tap water. That's the chlorine dioxide. So Typically, like with this potable aqua chlorine dioxide tablets, it's 1 tablet per quart of water, so 4 tablets per gallon. In order to filter 1 gallon, you need 4 of these tablets. And then you could also, another thing too is bleach. You can use bleach. You need to make sure that the bleach is non-scented and it's just pure bleach. It doesn't have anything else. This one is 6% bleach, sodium hypochlorite. That's what bleach is. 6% bleach. Most bleaches are between 5 and 8%. You know, you don't really need to get hung up on the percentage. What you do need to know is that for bleach, you need to put 8 drops per gallon if the water is clear, and then double that if the water is dirty or cloudy, or if the water temperature is really low. You know, you want to increase that. So 8 drops if the water is clear, and 16 drops if the water is dirty, and that will disinfect most bacteria, viruses, and potentially some protozoas and parasites, but it's not guaranteed. Remember, it's a chemical, and chemicals don't work as effectively against parasites. But if you're in a survival situation, it's better than nothing. You know, if you have no way of starting a fire, then it's better than nothing. So bleach is another option. And then, so moving on from the chemicals, we have filters. And the way filters work is pretty much, you know, your filter, inside of the filter here, there's little elements inside. It's like a sponge basically, and the sponge will trap the parasites, the spores, the bacteria, the viruses. The thing with filters that you need to know is the micron size. So every filter will say what size of micron filter it is, and the microns is basically how large of a microorganism it will filter, what type of membrane. So here we have 0.1 micron. You need to have a minimum of a 1 micron filter in order to, you know, if there's any kind of water filter that's not at least 1 micron, then don't even bother buying it, because you're not going to be able to filter anything with it. It needs to be at least 1 micron. The smaller it is, the better it is. So like the Sawyer here is Sawyer.com. The Sawyer is 0.1 micron, which is supposed to be good for everything, for viruses and bacteria. According to, I'm sorry, not for viruses, but for bacteria. So if you have less than, according to the CDC, if you have less than a 0.3 micron filter, it will be good for bacteria, for salmonella, shigella, E. coli, things like that. So this filter here, it's 0.1 micron. So remember, their level is 0.3. So this will be good for bacteria. However, it's not going to be good for viruses. So you're going to have to use a combination. If you want to get the viruses out and you want to use a filter and you don't feel like boiling, you're going to have to use a combination of chemicals and the filter. So what you typically do is you'd filter it, and then after you filter it, you can add your potable aqua iodine, you know, or your tincture, or your chlorine dioxide, or your bleach, you know, and that will take care of the viruses. So that's what a lot of people do, is they combine the water filter with the chemicals to get the maximum effect of both of them, because they complement each other. Remember that the chemicals work the best on the viruses and the bacteria, and the filters work the best on the protozoas. So putting these two together, you know, like the chlorine dioxide, or, you know, and the filter, they're gonna complement each other, and it's gonna basically make it as effective as boiling, or almost as effective as boiling. Remember, boiling is the gold standard, so it's basically like the God of water purification. You can get close to God, but you'll never be God. You know what I'm saying? So that's the same thing, same principle. You know, if it's not less than 1 micron, it's not going to filter any parasites at all. So it has to be 1 micron. And And like I said, if it's less than 0.3 microns, it will get the bacteria, but it won't get the viruses. I don't care what the manufacturer tells you, it will not get the viruses. And here I have some examples of the filters, some brand names. You have Sawyer, Katadyn, and LifeStraw. Those are like the three big water filter companies. You could check them out. Sawyer Mini, the Katadyn, and the LifeStraw. The Katadyn is the largest one and the most bulky. It's geared more for backpackers. The LifeStraw is small and lightweight. It's like the size of this plunger. However, it's you have to actually stick it into the water source and drink directly from the water source. So a lot of people don't like that. I personally like the Sawyer Mini because with the Sawyer Mini, I can pretty much do exactly what the LifeStraw will do, because I can hook this up here. Hang on one second. I can hook this up here, and I can hook this tube up here, and I can stick this into a water source, and then from this little side here, this little nipple here, I can suck through the filter, and it'll pull the water up through the tube here, and it'll filter it. And then so it acts like a LifeStraw in that way. However, I can also connect it to this bag here that they have. I can unscrew this cap. I can screw this on. You know, I can fill this bag with my questionable water, screw this on, and then I'm good to go. I can pretty much just sip right out of this knob here. Another thing, so let's go into the cons with the filters. Now, the Sawyer Mini is my favorite, like I said. The cons with water filters is that, you know, they're plastic, okay? So this can break. You know, if this is in my backpack and I have some other gear on top of it, and I drop my backpack on a hard surface, or it falls 20 feet, this is going to potentially crack. You know, this is just plastic. It's not steel, you know, versus a canteen. You know, a canteen is solid steel. It's not going to break. It may dent, but it's not going to break. So you could potentially break this. Another thing too is that you need to clean it. So it's not a big deal to clean, but you know, you have to make sure you keep it clean. And as the filter gets older and the more you use it, you have to eventually replace it, you know. So even though you clean it out, because as you use it, the filter gets clogged up. So as it gets clogged up, it becomes less effective, and the water it takes longer for it to pass through. It starts to slow down. So you have to take this guy here and you suck this out, and you just blow the water out the opposite way, and it will clear out all the debris. You know, you stick it in the drinking side, and you fill this up into some water. It could be any water. You stick it in to the drinking side, and you push it out, and it'll push all the dirt out, you know, from the filter. Another thing too is that it can break. Obviously, it can also freeze. You know, that's a big consideration if you're going to keep this in your bug out bag and you live in a northern climate, or you know, your winters are pretty severe. You're going to have to make sure you take this out of your bug out bag, because it's going to freeze, and the inside of the filter is going to damage, you know, because there's water inside of the filter. There's always going to be water in there. It's never going to fully dry. And that little amount of water is going to freeze up, and it's going to damage the inside of the filter, which is very sensitive because it's very small. So this will be ineffective in cold climates. It's going to damage it. It's going to question, you know, once this thing freezes, it's not a guarantee that it's going to work the way it did before it froze, you know, and it increases the uncertainty factor that you don't know if it's going to work the same way again. So that's the negatives of a filter. The positives with the filter and also the chemicals over boiling is that it's much quicker and much easier. Boiling, you need to have some type of a fuel source. You need to have time to create a fire, things like that. You know, versus a pill, I can just throw this pill into the water and it's going to clean it out within a half hour, an hour. With the water filter, same thing. I can get my water and just quickly filter it out, and I'm good to go. And I can just move on. I don't have to worry about building a fire, waiting for the water to boil, letting it cool down. You know, even if I have a isobutane stove with me, Still going to take me time to boil it, and wait for it to cool down. It's a slower process, so a lot of people avoid boiling because of that, So, and then finally we have UV light. As far as UV light goes, the two main methods of UV light is sunlight or SteriPen. SteriPen is just like a little electronic device that generates a UV light, a very strong UV light. You dip it into your water source. I don't actually have one, but let's say you have your questionable water, you stick your SteriPen into it, you push the button, and it will kill everything inside. And then the other option is sunlight, so you can actually disinfect water with sunlight, and that will kill everything, parasites, bacteria, and viruses. The only downfall is that you need some type of a clear container that's going to not block out the UV light. So like a BPA-free water bottle is a good option, because the sun can pass through like a soda bottle, for instance, is a good option, or some type of a plastic water bottle. Has to be BPA free, otherwise the chemicals are going to leach from the plastic into the water. However, it will work. You just need to have, the sun has to be strong and constant, and you need to leave it in the sun for 6 to 8 hours minimum in bright sun, and the sun has to be strong. And obviously if it's in the winter time, it may not work as well because the sun is weaker and the water may freeze, so that's another thing to consider. Just like with the filter, it's not going to be as effective. However, if you have a SteriPen, the SteriPen will work anytime. It's just the only downfall with the SteriPen is that it's electronic. It can break, it may malfunction, so you can't rely on anything electronic. You need to always have backups. If you do have a SteriPen, you should always have at least some pills, some chlorine dioxide, some iodine tincture, and at least a way of boiling. You don't want to just rely on one method. That's another thing too, is that you don't want to rely on one method, so you don't want to only have one method. So like, boiling is the best, but it doesn't hurt me to carry some chlorine dioxide if I need to, for whatever reason I can't get a fire going, or something happens with my isobutane canister. Let's say it gets ruptured because I dropped my pack on a rock too hard, or my stove doesn't work for whatever reason. You always want to have at least two methods. You don't want to just rely on one method. So even if you have a canteen and an isobutane stove, or you're really good with starting fires, you always want to have a chemical with you. I prefer chlorine dioxide because it's in a pill form and it works really strong. I think chlorine dioxide is the best chemical that you can use, but you can also have your tincture, your iodine tincture, your iodine tablets, and then you also have bleach, so you can choose from any of these. But you always want to have some redundancies. You don't want to just have one. You don't want to just have a filter. You don't want to just have chemicals, and you don't want to just have UV light or boiling. You want to have at least two methods, and in my opinion, you should always have at least tablets with you, some type of water purification tablets. Like I said, I prefer chlorine dioxide. It's the strongest tablet that you can get. It's stronger than iodine. It works better than iodine on parasites, and it's not sensitive to light, and it's also it doesn't affect people as much if you're pregnant or if you have an iodine sensitivity, things like that. It's more stable, it lasts longer, versus the iodine, it has to be kept away from light and at room temperature. It's iodine's a little more sensitive. It can lose its strength very easily if you don't keep it in the right conditions. So chlorine dioxide is my best choice. Bleach is a great choice as well. And then, like I said, you keep some tincture. Iodine tincture is great if you have your survival kit. You keep your tincture. It has multifunctions, from wound cleaning to disinfecting. But bleach is really good for SHTF. You can disinfect water if, let's say, you need to gather water for your house and there's a grid down event and your water supply is not working anymore. You can use bleach to disinfect a lot of water. You know, you have a container, a big container of bleach, and it will disinfect a lot of waters for you. So that's like a large, in my opinion, that's better for like a large, you have to filter a lot of water. So finally, I'm going to finish up with the pros and cons of each method, and I'm going to tell you my recommendations. So boiling is the best, but the major negatives are you need to have a fuel source or fire, which is not always a guarantee. Even if you have like an isobutane stove, it may fail. You know, it may be hard to get it going. The stove may break. You know, the stove that screws onto the isobutane, it may break and it may not work if you dropped your pack or you bent it or something like that. You also, you know, need a sparker sometimes. Same thing, starting a fire may not be that easy because, you know, it may be wet outside. You know, you may not have a way of starting a fire, you know, unless you can rub sticks together, but that's very hard and takes a lot of time, and you need the right conditions for that. So it's not easy to get a fire or fuel. You know, you need to have fuel or fire. So that's the negative with boiling. Otherwise, it's the best method. It'll kill everything. So, you know, it doesn't hurt you to carry a canteen cup or a steel canteen. Moving on, we have chemicals which taste bad. They can expire and they don't work on parasites. However, they are the easiest to use as long as you take care of them and you don't let them expire or you don't expose them to light. Like the iodine needs to be kept in a dark bottle. You know, so it will work okay against parasites, but not great. Iodine will not work against parasites that much, really. It has a low to moderate effectiveness. As per the CDC, they did a study on the effectiveness of potable aqua tablets on cryptosporidium cysts, and they found that after 2 hours, there were still like 30% of the cysts were still alive. So you need to have a long contact time with the chemicals if you want to use them on parasites. And many times, even with the long contact time, it's not enough to kill them all, you know. So that's the only downside. The upside is it will kill bacteria and viruses very quickly within 30 minutes. So that's a disadvantage, is you need contact time. It needs to be clean water. If it's cloudy water, you need to have more of the chemical. And then you have UV light, which you need to have a strong sunlight. You know, and you need to have a clear plastic bottle that's BPA free in order to do that. And you need to have enough time in the sun. It has to be like 6 to 8 hours in the sun. And then you can use an SteriPen, but the SteriPen is an electronic device which can fail, and it has batteries and things like that. So there's, you know, it's not as reliable. Filters are great against parasites, bacteria, but they won't work against viruses. Depending on the filter, it may not work against bacteria either, but it will work against parasites, cryptosporidium and giardia, and most other parasites around the world. However, like I said, it doesn't work for viruses because the filter is too small inside of the filter. It's not going to filter the viruses out. So the best thing to do with the filters is combine them together with the chemical. Like I said, chlorine dioxide with the Sawyer Mini is my personal choice. For that, you know, I prefer boiling, but in the summer months, I will carry this Sawyer filter, but like I said, it can freeze, it can break, it can become clogged, and it's not effective against viruses, you know. So my recommendations to you guys, and just coming from a common sense point of view, I'm going to break everything down now. Iodine tincture you should keep in your survival kit because you can use it for cleaning wounds, but also for disinfecting. So it's a no-brainer to keep this in your survival kit. As this could function as an emergency backup, you know, water purifier. Every survival kit should have a stainless steel canteen cup or a canteen that you can boil water in. So these two things are mandatory in my opinion. The tincture and the canteens. These are mandatory in my opinion. Then from there you have some choices. You can go with bleach, you can go with chlorine dioxide, and you can go with iodine pills. In my opinion, if you already have tincture, you don't need iodine pills, so you can set those aside. And then chlorine dioxide, in my opinion, is the best choice for having a secondary method of purification from boiling. It's better than bleach, and it's easier to use. Bleach, you have to measure out the drops and everything. Here you can just drop the pill in and let it work. So chlorine dioxide is my choice for a bug out bag, a get home bag, a survival kit. If you're hiking, you're backpacking, that's what my choice is for that. You can use bleach. In my opinion, bleach is best for the homestead. You know, if it's a disaster, SHTF situation, you can use the bleach. If you have to, let's say, fill up a 5-gallon jug with water or multiple gallons of water for like a couple of days, then you know, bleach is good, because bleach, you can take a whole tablespoon and you can dump it in and you can purify like 20 gallons at one time. You know, so you could literally take, if you take 1 teaspoon of bleach and pour it into a 5-gallon jug, it will purify that 5-gallon jug. So this is better for the homestead. And then moving on, water filters, I'm not a crazy fan of, you know, because they're fragile. They need to be cleaned, so I don't recommend that you rely on them. If you do carry a water filter, it should not replace any of these methods here. It should not replace your chlorine dioxide. It should not replace your iodine tincture, and it should not replace, you know, these are your mandatory items here. Your canteen, your chlorine dioxide, and your tincture are my personal things that I carry. This should not replace that. You know, this is just a convenience, in my opinion. You know, if you need to quickly filter water, if you're on the move, it's more of a convenience factor than it is anything else, because it won't work on viruses, and there are some nasty viruses out there. There's hepatitis, HIV. Well, HIV you can't get through water, but hepatitis, you know, there's a lot of nasty stuff. So, and this will not work on the viruses. So you have to combine this. If you're going to use the filter, combine it with the chlorine dioxide. And the Sawyer Mini is my personal recommendation for a water filter if you want to get a good entry-level water filter. And, you know, like I said, it can freeze in the winter months, so you need to make sure that you take it out of your bug out bag in the winter, and make sure you keep it clean as well, and that you don't break it, you know, you don't drop it. You have to be delicate with these things. So that's pretty much it, guys. It's a very long video, a lot of information, and you know, remember too to keep a bandana with you for cleaning out the water. I always carry 2 bandanas with me. Keep the bandana in case you have to filter the water and make it clear. And so like I said, going over the dosages with the bleach, it's 8 drops per gallon if the water's clear, 16 drops for dirty water, and then the iodine tincture is 5 drops per quart if the water's clear, and 10 drops per quart if the water's dirty. So that's pretty much it, guys. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. You know, save this video as a reference. You know, if you need to go back and, you know, figure something out, whatever, you know, so you can save this video. It's a lot of great information in this video here. I spent probably half a day preparing it for you. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Remember the 3 P's: prepare, practice, and persevere. You prepare by storing essential gear and buying essential gear that you need. You practice with that gear, so this way when something bad happens, you're in a good position to persevere through that situation. And then remember too that any kind of bad situation, whether it's an SHTF event or a survival situation, you need to mentally persevere through that situation. It's not enough just to practice and buy gear. You need to mentally have the mental resilience to push through, and mental toughness. So that's it, guys. The 3 P's: prepare, practice, persevere. And don't forget to thank God for all the blessings in your life, and you know, thank God for all the you know, all the healthy family members that you still have. and for everything else that he gives to you. And take care, and I'll see you guys soon.